Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're going to demystify the profound biological and psychological realities of eating disorders. My goal here is to teach you exactly how modern medical science understands, categorizes, and crucially, treats these incredibly complex conditions. We're going way beyond just the surface symptoms to really uncover the neurochemistry and psychological drivers that map the road to recovery.
So here's our roadmap for today. We'll start by unmasking eating disorders. Then look at anorexia, the restrictive trap. After that, we'll cover bulimia and its vicious cycle, explore their shared biopsychosocial roots, and finally, wrap up with evidence-based paths to recovery. All right, part 1. Unmasking eating disorders, well beyond the stereotypes.
Moving right into section 2, anorexia, the restrictive trap.
So clinically speaking, anorexia nervosa is defined by a persistent restriction of energy intake that leads to a significantly low body weight. But, this physical state is actually fueled by a terrifying psychological trap. It's an intense, overwhelming fear of weight gain and a profoundly distorted body image. It's literally a situation where the mind is actively warring against the body's most basic need for fuel. Now, as we look at the clinical features, severity is objectively measured by BMI, with anything under 15 classified as extreme. But the behaviors, they can vary widely. Anorexia isn't just about fasting. It typically presents in two primary ways: the restricting type, which relies on strict dieting and excessive exercise, and the binge eating or purging type. And all of this happens while maintaining that dangerously low body weight. Take a second to absorb this next point, because it's a truly sobering reality. Anorexia nervosa holds the highest mortality rate of any psychological disorder. We aren't just talking about mental distress here. We're looking at a severe condition that is frequently fatal if the cycle isn't broken. To understand why, let's look at what happens physically. When energy intake is persistently restricted, the body essentially begins to consume itself just to survive. The heart muscle weakens, leading to dangerous bradycardia or a super slow heart rate. Bones lose density, causing osteoporosis. You might even see the growth of lanugo, which is this fine, downy hair the body frantically produces to insulate itself because it lacks body fat. Meanwhile, things like the reproductive system shut down entirely, resulting in amenorrhea just to conserve energy. It's a total system crisis.
That brings us to section 3, bulimia, the vicious cycle.
Unlike anorexia, bulimia nervosa hinges on recurrent cycles. For a diagnosis, these happen at least once a week for 3 months. The hallmark here is the binge, objectively eating a massive amount of food, coupled with a terrifying sense of losing control. This is immediately followed by panic, and then inappropriate compensatory behaviors to prevent weight gain, like self-induced vomiting, misusing laxatives, or severe fasting.
Now here's a fact that absolutely demythologizes a very common stereotype. Unlike anorexia, which is defined by significantly low weight, those suffering from bulimia typically fall within a normal weight range. Because it doesn't inherently result in a severely low BMI, bulimia often hides in plain sight. And honestly, that makes the internal psychological torment that much more isolating for the patient.
To really grasp the sheer psychological momentum that keeps patients trapped, we have to walk through this diet, binge, purge cycle. It almost always starts with restrained, rigid dieting, which biologically primes the body to crave food. When the dam finally breaks, the binge provides this temporary emotional relief. But almost immediately, massive guilt sets in, which triggers the purge. And while the purge relieves that acute guilt, it just resets the cycle right back to starvation. It is a completely closed loop of distress.
And the physical consequences? Well, they primarily result from the sheer trauma of purging. Acid from frequent vomiting causes permanent dental erosion and severe esophageal damage. You'll often see visible swelling of the parotid glands in the jaw, too. But most critically, purging causes massive electrolyte imbalances. These can suddenly trigger fatal heart arrhythmias, even in someone who otherwise appears perfectly healthy.
Let's shift gears to section 4, shared biopsychosocial roots.
Okay, I want you to study this table for a moment. These conditions are a perfect storm of biology, psychology, and environment. Look beyond just culture for a second. Both disorders feature very real genetic heritability and altered neurotransmitters. In anorexia, altered serotonin and dopamine actually dictate how the brain processes reward and anxiety. In bulimia, serotonin dysregulation impacts mood and satiety. When you combine this biological wiring with intense psychological perfectionism or rigid dieting, and then add sociocultural pressures like the media's thin ideal, you get the deeply rooted blueprint for these disorders.
So seeing this incredibly heavy genetic and psychological burden, you really have to ask, how do we treat these complex conditions? I mean, how do you unspool a disorder that is literally wired into a patient's neurochemistry?
That takes us to our final part, Section 5, Evidence-Based Paths to Recovery.
Because of the severe mortality risk we discussed earlier, step 1 for anorexia absolutely must be medical stabilization. You simply cannot do effective psychotherapy with a starving brain. It just doesn't work. Once weight is restored, treatments like the Maudsley approach, which is a family-based treatment that's highly effective for adolescents, take over. For adults, enhanced cognitive behavioral therapy becomes vital to dismantle those deeply ingrained cognitive distortions about body shape and weight.
Now, for bulimia, cognitive behavioral therapy is the first-line weapon to intercept the thoughts that trigger the diet binge-purge cycle. But remember that biological serotonin component we just looked at? This is exactly why SSRIs, specifically fluoxetine, are actually FDA approved for bulimia. They help regulate mood and that critical feeling of satiety. Basically, they give the patient a biological foothold so they can fully engage in their therapy.
I want to leave you with this thought. If we recognize eating disorders as severe biological and psychological conditions, rather than mere choices, how might that change how we support those fighting to recover? When we really understand the genetics, the neurochemistry, and the terrifying medical complications, it's abundantly clear that these are not lifestyle choices. They are formidable illnesses. By teaching ourselves these clinical mechanics, we become so much better equipped to replace judgment with scientifically grounded compassion. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and we'll see you in the next explainer.